All right, thank you. This is the first lesson of the professional course, the Pathway to Ascension professional course. This is the first time we're actually giving this. The first time we're giving this course at the Academy for New Standard Systemology. And it's also, today we're launching this course on the summer solstice, 2024, and this is the 16th anniversary of the Mardukite, since releasing the Mardukite movement to the public from the underground back in 2008. It's hard to say. There's still some discrepancy about when the Systemology Society officially began. It's kind of always been there in the background of the work that was taking place with the Mardukites, the Mardukite Academy, and so forth. But it is at least the 16th anniversary of the Mardukite movement and the 15th anniversary of the Anunnaki Bibles. So for the Mardukite Academy, this Pathway to Ascension professional course is actually grade 6. If you're following the chronology of the Mardukite Academy, which covers the past 30 years of work. However, for the Systemology Society, for New Standard Systemology, the only prerequisite, the only requirement to taking this course is Fundamentals of Systemology. And previously this month, we gave a series of lectures on Fundamentals of Systemology as basic course, and it is the only prerequisite for taking this course at the Academy. There's no real academic certification, and I apologize for those in the United Kingdom where to certify or to be certified means something entirely different. But we don't offer a diploma, let us say, for the professional course as we do for the Fundamentals of Systemology basic course. This is not a strictly academic, intellectual course. The only thing that's academic and intellectual about it is the instruction of it, of giving you the information. But the actual material itself, we're going to blow through this fairly quickly. We're going to move, as I said, the Fundamentals of Systemology. The whole purpose of the basic course was to synthesize the material that we had developed over the course of several years and what took many volumes to really sort out. The purpose of the basic course, the fundamentals, is essentially to get someone to the point of being able to actually apply the Pathway to Ascension professional course, or pathway course if you prefer. This the series of lessons that we're going to cover is the processing levels 0 to 6. You may have heard me talk about the grades for the Mardukite Academy. The graded material academically is separate from what we treat as levels 0 to 6 for the Pathway to Ascension. Now those are processing levels of development concerning actual practical application of systemology in the form of systematic processing. This course assumes that you have already gotten that background, that you have already reviewed the formal session and the methods of how processing works. So the theories, the basic fundamentals that are basically the foundations of what we're going to cover, well, we're going to assume that you've done this chronologically and that you already have those. And if not, I would recommend looking at that material. The material we are going to cover here is referred to as, again, the Pathway to Ascension. Now, I have these two copies here. This is Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Pathway to Ascension material. And again, covering all levels 0 to 6. This is also the equivalent of grade 6 at the Mardukite Academy. This material is also available in 16 individual pocket-size lessons. And there are 8 of those lessons in each one of these volumes. It is progressive, accumulative, developmental, gradual understanding, or gradient course as we progress. So this material, it builds upon itself, builds upon, again, the expectation that you've already treated the material in the basic course, the Fundamentals basic course. And that's all I'm going to say about that in terms of introducing this, in terms of the prerequisites, because there's a lot of material to cover within the Pathway to Ascension levels 0 to 6, and this is entirely dependent on the idea that an individual is prepared to do it. Now there's another particular bonus and another first for us with these Pathway to Ascension volumes and the pocket lessons that they're also available in. This material, for the first time in the entire history of the Systemology Society, was developed explicitly with the solo practitioner in mind. And this is something that, other than the volume, some of you that have worked with some of our previous materials as we developed them, for example, Crystal Clear was one of the only volumes we had ever released with the idea that it might be used by someone, on their own, in what we used to refer to as self-processing. We now refer to it as solo processing or solo piloting, because again, as explained in the basic course, all processing has to be conducted by self, whether it's being co-piloted or assisted by another individual, or an individual is doing it on their own. So solo piloting, this is the first time we're developing the Pathway to Ascension material and delivering it with a solitary practitioner in mind. Again, this is a lot of the first processing levels that we're going to treat. It deals with material that we have had books on before, we've had workshops that pertain to before, all of them basically operating under the framework of traditional piloting, one person assisting another. And so a lot of the attention on those courses was actually spent in the actual practice of piloting another individual, conducting a session that involved another individual. In this case, we're going to focus specifically on how to practice this really more on your own terms and at your own pace, independent of an assistant or a co-pilot. And again, this is a first. So the reason it's called the professional course, as opposed to the basic course or even an advanced course or intermediary course, this is a professional course in New Standard Systemology. So really, although my intention in delivering it this way is for the solo pilot, for the solitary practitioner, this same course applies to professional systemology, for those that are going to be piloting systemology as a co-pilot situation of handling seekers and doing this as a profession, full-time or otherwise. As such, whether you want to refer to it as the Pathway course or the professional course, the abbreviation that's used throughout the literature is PC. And so this covers, I said there were 16 lessons, 16 lesson booklets, 8 of them in each of these volumes. When they are referred to, when we refer to the material that's contained in one or another as we progress along, it is referred to as PC1 or PC5 or PC 16, and that is an indicator that it is the professional course or pathway course lesson of that number. And so again, 1 through 8 are found in Pathway Ascension Volume 1, and 9 through 16 are found in Volume 2. And whether or not those particular lesson numbers are going to align perfectly with the lecture video presentations, whether or not we actually cover this all in 16 lessons and it actually correlates to the PC lessons given in your book, well, that's another story. But for the most part, I'm going to try and stick pretty close to the material here, because again, we spent at least a year after developing it, after spending a decade developing and covering a way of communicating this. We then spent the last year, prior to me giving these lectures and delivering this publicly, we've actually spent a year developing how we were going to do this and how these processing levels were going to line up, and the new standard systemology materials that are now available. So we've been working on this for quite some time, And rather than, go on a series of, there's a lot connected to this subject of systemology. It's filled volumes. It's filled up to this point somewhere around 1.5 million words of printed literary material. So there are many things that we could discuss. There are many things that we could cover. And again, what I have tried to do in this new course, this new standard systemology, and this new presentation of it, is really define or refine what our importances were regarding this information. What is the most critical? There's a lot of information that we could talk about. What is the most critical for a seeker to know at each gradient step? And these levels are not arbitrary numbers. We've established specific goals at each point, and then focused on the methods of educational and processing work that will help to achieve those goals. And that material is basically essentially reviewed until those goals are met. This isn't this isn't one of those things where, if you could just pay your way up to some high level, there's some ultimate secret that is going to just, that's really what you're all trying to get to, and all the rest of it was just to kind of weed people out along the way. This isn't that type of work. The Systemology Society has never been that kind of organization. In fact, it's hard to really consider ourselves a mystery school when so much effort and attention has been put into publishing the complete chronological research and development of how this has all come to be. This is all freely accessible now to the public. And so the critical responsibility on my part, and the danger to the extent that we could take some of these courses that are just being, again, distributed freely on YouTube, is there's a certain responsibility that I need to have in delivering them. So it is not very likely that, for example, the upper level advanced training courses are going to be, displayed freely on a channel and just up for purview of the general public. But before we even approach that point, we have a lot of work to accomplish, a lot of material to cover. And again, I'm going to be kind of not ruthlessly vigorous, but we're going to be pretty dauntless in trying to just tackle the material and deliver it in as a concise and efficient manner as possible. Again, not ruling out the fact that you really should also obtain, the videos and these lectures are not a substitution to the study of the material as it's been printed, as it's been published. And again, we're taking a practical approach to this. For solo processing, for solo practitioners, that means, twice the responsibility on your part to both the education of understanding the work and the application of the work itself to be, effective with it, but also undergoing the processing itself. There's no one to bail you out when you get into trouble, so you got to know this stuff pretty good when you're going to be handling it on your own. So let's get into a bit of how we do that. So the first lesson booklet, or the first lesson within Pathway to Ascension Volume 1, is increasing awareness. And this is where again, we've introduced systematic processing in the previous course, but in this case we're going to start putting it more into practice. And by this point, an individual should already, especially if they're going to be doing this as a solo practitioner, they should already be in the practice of the idea of applying a formal session or the formal session script to themselves. Again, it's traditionally been taught where individuals are assisting other individuals, but in this case we're talking about solo piloting. So as you should be aware from the previous and probably the most critical lesson 6, the sixth part of the basic course, the 6th lesson within Fundamentals of Systemology textbook, or the 6th standalone basic lesson pocket booklet, is called Systemology Processing, and that is the one that introduces the formal session. And so if nothing else, assuming you're new to this new standard systemology, even if you've been following along over the years, that last part of how we've been able to really fine-tune what we referred to as processing or sessions and whatnot for many years, we've finally been able to kind of communicate that in a more concise way than ever before. And we're going to have to continue that now, both as a part of the education of the pathway. We have to basically make sure that an individual is able to apply this work. Otherwise, this isn't something. Again, we don't do diploma-based programs at this point, because this isn't based on something that you're going to just think yourself out of, or if you intellectually know it, well, that suffices. This is about doing stuff, and the various levels. We're going to be covering the information over the next presumably 16 levels, 16 lessons. We're going to be covering that information quite, to give you the background, but much sooner than what, in a much smaller amount of time than what an individual is going to be able to apply it. So unlike the fundamentals or basic course, which just introduces a lot of background and theories and exercises that you could pretty much practice indefinitely, in this case we're talking about a pathway that some people, to be completely realistic, may or may not even achieve the summit of in this lifetime, depending on their ambition for that, or how much time they put into actually doing this material. So not necessarily a difficult subject to learn or to teach, for example, here at the Academy and with the book material and so forth, but again, we're going past a point of just intellectual knowingness, but of actual application. So processes, these are actions. Again, applying systemology to everyday life. There are practices, and we are doing this systematically. These are systematically designed, specific processes, specific applications of systemology to reach a very specific endpoint or result. And in most cases, we're going to do something repetitively, because repetition in and of itself is actually a difficult. It's rather just like hammering. Instead of hammering a nail, just kind of leaning up against it very, very strongly, very tightly, and expecting it to just keep going through. We alternate. We've talked about alternating our attentions. We alternate our attentions on and off of it, or with something subjective and something objective, to basically get almost the equivalent of that repeated swing of a hammer against a nail. In many ways, level 0 of the Pathway to Ascension, it includes many things that could essentially be considered review of concepts that have been covered in Fundamentals of Systemology, but we're now putting it into more direct practice. And again, using the systematic structure, the level 0 to 6 systematic structure, that represents 0 being one tier. We say 0 to 6, but it's actually seven tiers or 7 levels of of gradual incremental increase. So we're going to be examining stuff far and beyond the way things were covered in the fundamentals. So if we consider for a minute we talked about the alpha spirit, and I'm not going to repeat too many of the alpha spirit as the individual, the I am. I want to mostly focus on new terminology and new semantics as opposed to a lot of review. So remember, the alpha spirit is what we are actually treating in systemology. The alpha spirit is the individual, the spiritual being, the one back behind everything, the one that's operating the mind, operating a body, isn't inside either of them, the one that's back there still at the beginning of everything, behind all these other screens, but as unfortunately, looked too longly through them and forgotten where its own position is. But we have to consider for a moment that the alpha spirit, it is able to self-direct its nearly unlimited awareness, and this has taken place along a long span of perceived existence, and we refer to it in later levels as the backtrack, but it would be more appropriate the spiritual timeline. This is what we really consider it. Now, we talk about the backtrack. Now, if we consider a spiritual timeline, the spiritual timeline is essentially the zoo line. It's just kind of being treated as the condensation or accumulation of time, the concept of time, as opposed to when we refer to it as zoo. And usually timelines we tend to, as a linear representation, we tend to put in a kind of a horizontal point. But, if we consider that as what an individual considers, present, what the present moment is, they've also had a long, period of their spiritual timeline prior to, this short, we'll say it like an incarnation of the current lifetime. This little segment here, and even that, if we consider, the unlimited, we don't have enough paper and enough range and scope to demonstrate to scale the type of what we're dealing with. But everything from that point past would be considered the backtrack. This would be like a timeline or a time track, a track of much like a train that is traveling a particular journey. And so the potential awareness that an individual has, when we talk about human potential or spiritual potential, spiritual ability, zoo at its near infinite point, we're talking about the individual back here. And if this is 8, on our standard model, then we're talking about 7, the position of the alpha spirit. And its concept of time and the accumulation of time, the way it has accumulated its experience of time, there's actually been a reduction, a deterioration of free units of awareness, the actual what's accessible to an individual at any given moment, as they've progressed, as we've continued our spiritual evolution, and this is important because there's a I don't even know if it's a misunderstanding or if it's blatant misinformation, but there's misconstrued knowledge that we've started at some kind of lower point, or we're trying to evolve to something, or that all of this is a school for us, and this is all unfolding for the first time. If anything, we are trying to get back to where we've been, and we are trying to undo a lot of the mistakes that we have made along the way that have put us into this condition. So this isn't any, the reason why systemology was able to be possibly, charted and found is because this is not new territory. This is not a person, when this stuff clicks and certain things are handled and defragmented, that occurs because this material and this information and what we're treating has already taken place. This is true because it's already been true for you once before. It's the only way in which it would possibly work. And so we are retracing our steps. We're doing a 180, as we sometimes say, and retracing our steps back to these points where certain, what we call fragmentation, has taken place. And this fragmentation, as we chart along, an individual could remain here indefinitely and still experience what is considered as time. But unfortunately, what has happened along the spiritual timeline is that at each point along the way, there have been other positions, other places in which a viewpoint or the sense of beingness of the alpha spirit has been positioned or believed itself to be exclusively. And things have just compounded from that. We talk about reality agreements and why this material plane is so solid. Each time we've experienced another further solid, further more condensed and compacted, if you want to be esoteric about it, each time the beta existence has shifted from, for example, a higher position in the Kabbalah or the ladder of lights to a subsequent one. The lowest common denominator, or the lowest point, the 0-point continuity, becomes that much more solid. It becomes the combination of all former reality agreements, all former universes, all former energetic mass, and then some, and which creates the next layer of more compacted, more condensed material. And so that is one of the reasons why we call it defragmentation, or what we're actually systematic processing, is to incrementally undo various layers of agreement that have taken place that have essentially, compounded to become the restrictive human condition that we now experience, because things were not always, of this way. This is also why, and this is unique to our tradition, but this is also why we refer to, as opposed to the alpha state, we refer to beta existence. And beta existence, for our purposes, for today, for as you're watching this and as you're reading these books and as you're operating today, beta existence would be what we call the material plane or the physical universe. Prior to the existence of what we consider the material plane or the physical universe as it is today, there were former versions of beta existence, ones that weren't nearly as solidly restrictive, ones where, for example, gravity did not play as critical of a role, unless it was intended to, things of that nature. The type of spiritual, metaphysical freedom, almost, beyond the concepts of even science fiction and fantasy that one might imagine. These all existed at one juncture or another. And so, our goal in systematic processing is not to, enforce a dogmatic religion where you have to, buy into these various beliefs and, well, how many universes and what order of them and what do we label them or anything of that nature. The goal of systematic processing and systemology as an applied philosophy is for an individual to apply the actual defragmentation, the actual processing techniques itself, and as a result of that, be able to uncover this type of information on their own, and confirm even the kind of findings that we refer to in some of the upper levels of our work.
The Joshua Free Imprint, JFI Publications, in conjunction with Mardukite Academy and the Systemology Society, present the single greatest breakthrough of the 21st century for all humanity. The perfection of a new standard systemology, a complete map for the way out from the bottom to the top, and your key to being an ascended master in this lifetime. Everything you need is contained in 3 progressive, self-guiding courses: the Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course, the Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, and the Keys to the Kingdom Advanced Training Course. And each should be studied and applied in their intended sequence and order as displayed in this video. All 3 courses combined are available as 5 standard hardcover volumes, but also as 33 installments, since each single course lesson is also available individually as a pocket-sized manual. The Fundamentals of Systemology basic course includes Being More Than Human, Realities in Agreement, Windows to Experience, Ancient Systemology, A History of Systemology, and Systemology Processing. The Pathway to Ascension professional course, including processing levels 0 through 6, includes in Volume 1, Increasing Awareness, Thought and Emotion, Clear Communication, Handling Humanity, Free Your Spirit, Escaping Spirit Traps, Eliminating Barriers, and Conquest of Illusion. The Pathway to Ascension Volume 2 includes Confronting the Past, Lifting the Veils, Spiritual Implants, Games and Universes, Spiritual Energy, Spiritual Machinery, The Arcs of Infinity, and Alpha Thought. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 7 in Volume 1 includes The Secret of Universes, Games, Goals, and Purposes, The Jewel of Knowledge, Implanted Universes, and the Supplementals Systemology Biofeedback and Systemology Procedures. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 8 in Volume 2 includes Entities and Fragments, Spiritual Perception, Mastering Ascension, Advancing Systemology, and the AT Supplement Systemology Piloting. All titles are available from your favorite bookseller. Explore new standard systemology today, and may you never be the same.